Thanks for joining us for today's message, but don't stop there. Download our app today and stay connected throughout the week. And we would love to hear how God's using this ministry to impact your life. So let us know by sending a message to amen@morelifechurch.com. Now enjoy today's message.
Today, in part 3 of this series, we are changing things up a bit. And what I am doing, and what we're doing together today, is I've invited John and Barbie Scanlon, who are our Connect Group directors. And I've invited them here today to join me on platform. And we are going to have a conversation and get to know them a little bit better as we continue this series on Won't You Be My Neighbor. So would you do me a big favor? Put your hands together and give a great big welcome to John and Barbie Scanlon as they come. Come on, guys, let's grab a seat together. These guys are incredible, and you're going to be able to hear some things about their story today that I'm very excited about. And the reason I wanted to do this is they have a really deep passion. They really have a passion like very few people do, to help us as a church family go deeper in our relationships. And so I wanted to take some time this morning for you to get to know them and hear their story a little bit. And especially as it relates to this whole series, which my prayer for this series is this, that our church family would understand that relationships and smaller group settings, those are God's design for our life. It's not an idea that a church or a pastor or a group of people came up with to get you to participate in something that I or others want you to do. This is our heartfelt attempt at helping you, coming alongside of you, and inviting you into an opportunity to do relationship with others. And this dear couple, as you get to know them, they are really well equipped to help us. And you're going to hear just in a second from their own mouth the journey that they've been on. And here's my hope and here's my prayer for everybody present and you watching online, that over the next 25 or so minutes that you'll give us your full, complete attention, and that I believe that by the end of this, you're going to receive some encouragement and some hope for your own life. How many of you could use a little bit of encouragement today? Yeah, good. Well, I think you're going to get that today. So let's jump right in. And part 3, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Why don't you all, John and Barbie, tell us a little bit, tell the church family a little bit about your background, who you are, and kind of how you met and what your life was like before you knew one another.
Okay, I'll
Ladies
start.
first, right? Ladies first, John said.
Jump in, honey.
Well, let me tell you where we are now.
Yeah.
So you can see how far we've come. We've been married 17 and a half years. We have 5 kids, 3 grandkids. When we first met, I was a single mom with 3 kids, ages 3, 5, and 11. And he stepped in and became dad to them and taught me how love was supposed to be. I had a pretty rough background, and so he brought kindness and gentleness and just showed me what love is supposed to be.
That's awesome.
And so what she didn't say was it took her 6 months to call me after the initial passing of the phone numbers.
You got ghosted before ghosting was a thing.
I know.
That's awesome.
But I wore her down.
You wore it down.
So persistence pays off, everybody.
Okay, good.
God was healing me.
Yes, he was. And so with that, really, we both brought, we were a blended family.
Yeah.
And so we both brought, some stuff from our past that we had to work through early in our relationship. And then even our first year was really a very trying year for us. We had 2 major losses in our family. Barbie's father passed away, and then my sister passed away, all within that first year of us being married. So the early years were definitely trying for us.
Tell us a little bit, John, about your background and what you've done in life and before you and Barbie got together. Tell us about who you are.
Yeah, so right out of high school, I went in the military, and so I did 2.5 years active duty. I came off active duty and I actually stayed in the National Guard. I actually retired from the National Guard. Had a deployment to Iraq in 2009. And then after coming off active duty, I went to college for a couple years. And then I actually got accepted to the Ohio State Highway Patrol. So I was a state trooper here in Ohio for about 8 years. And so, a lot of my background was military, law enforcement, so very, I guess, a very rough exterior. So,
Yeah.
And to go back a little further in my life, one thing that kind of drastically changed the course of my life was when I was in 8th grade, came home from a normal day of school, and the squad was in the parking lot of our home, and my mother was laying there. She'd had a heart attack, and she passed away. And that was a hard time for me, and it kind of changed the trajectory of my life. I had this emptiness, this hole inside that I just didn't know what to do with. And I started dating, and through high school, I was with the same guy all through high school, and he became that emptiness. I looked to him to fill what only God could fill, and ended up pregnant at 17. And when I went to tell my dad, he said, well, I made you a appointment at Planned Parenthood. I want you to either give up the baby for adoption or have an abortion. And so when I came out of there, he said, so what did you decide? And I said, I'm keeping the baby. I'm not giving up my baby. And so he said, well, if you want to have a place to live, then you're going to get married. So we got married. I was 17, and I thought I was in love. I thought, okay, this is what you do. And was married only for about 2.5 years. And so that was kind of the beginning of some hard things for me.
Very difficult beginning,
Yeah.
which led to some other difficult things in relationships. And if you don't mind, I want to say this and preface what she's about to say, that I just want to first say thank you for telling your story, and John, for your military service and active duty and being deployed. Thank you. Thank you. And John and Barbie, they know this is coming, and they've already agreed to it, but it just means a lot to me, because as you hear some things that transpired in their life, you're going to see the type of courageous individuals that they are, in being able to share this with you and people online and wherever this ends up being shared. And I know their hearts, that they don't want this pain that they've experienced to be wasted. They want it to be purposeful. They want it to be something that sets other hearts and minds and lives free, so that you can experience the same redemptive story that they have. So the relationships that you had in the past, I'm going to kind of jump ahead, but one of those relationships became abusive.
Yes.
And talk to us about that abusive relationship that you got into.
So after that, I was in a 7-year relationship that was mentally and verbally abusive. And to be honest, back then, I never heard of such a thing. When you heard of the word abuse, I always thought, it was just hitting somebody, that type. But just to give you a picture, it's tearing down who you are, calling you names, using intimidation factors, breaking things, living on eggshells, not ever knowing, is this, are things okay? When's everything going to fall through? And so it was an on-again, off-again relationship for 7 years. And then finally, it ended. And during that time, I just filled myself with positive things and truly started to believe that, okay, I could do this on my own. So when he did come back and try to get me back, as always, it was a firm no. I stuck to no, I'm not doing this again, no. And then,
Let me interrupt. Just so we're clear, because I know the story, I want to make sure no one misunderstands. The he that you're talking about is not John.
No,
it's
not
another
John.
individual.
no.
So I just want to make sure that you're clear on that as she's telling the story. So
Yeah.
he keeps on coming. He keeps on coming.
Right. He's not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
Threats are towards my life. Threats, just everything. Knocking on my door, showing up late at night. even calling my dad. But anyways, finally, one morning, my 4-year-old son had spent the night with him, and he was bringing him back. And when he came in, he locked the door, and he had a .22 pointed at me. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old that were just feet away, and he shot me the first time. And to be honest, when I seen him with the gun, I didn't believe there was bullets in it. I was thinking, I can handle this. This is just him intimidating me, and I totally underestimated, what he was capable of.
So that first shot goes off,
Yeah.
and it hits you.
Yeah.
Do you have any recollection as to where it struck you on your body?
My leg.
Hit you in the leg.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
And then my son was 4, he threw a toy at him to try to protect me.
Oh my.
And he turned towards the kids, and I just said, don't.
Oh my.
Yeah. And I had a family member who had spent the night. She was older, and she heard the commotion. She came downstairs, and she went to call for help, and he told her, put the phone down or I'm going to shoot you. So I said, get the kids and just get out. And he let her pass through the door. And it felt like forever. But by the end of it, I had been shot 6 times.
6 times?
6 times, close range.
And I don't want to ask you to revisit it, but just so people get this in their mind, because I think you can say that and we can just move past that, and I don't want to do that. As that's happening, what's going on in your mind, and where are you aware of, what are you aware of when that's going on?
In my mind, first of all, I'm worried about my kids and what they're doing. And I'm thinking, I can't die. I'm all they have.
Wow.
Look what he's done. Why would he do this in front of our children? Why would he? All these whys. But then also a part of me was, how do I calm him down? How do I, because through the relationship, that's kind of how it works. Things happen, and then I would try to calm him down and say whatever it was.
So even in the moment when you're the victim, you're the one who's literally being shot, you're still thinking, how do I call him off this ledge? How do I stop this?
Right. And I don't even remember the words that we said. I remember, it was in the living room, and I'm hiding behind furniture, and we're just, and there was a point where he shoved me down, and I got back up, and at the very end, I had my hand here, and the gun was at my chest. And in my mind, I'm just praying to God, I can't die. And so he just broke down, and he said, what have I done? I love you. And I did not know at the time that my oldest was still in the apartment. He was upstairs and had heard everything and was terrified. And so he put the gun down, and in my mind, I'm thinking, what do I do? I feel like I'm going to pass out. I can't run. And so I'm like, do I grab the gun? Do I try to shoot? I've never done that before. What does that mean?
Right.
My mind is just racing. So I just asked him to please let me outside because I couldn't breathe. And he tried to put me in his truck. And in my mind, I was thinking, he realized what he just did. He's just going to finish us off. Like, if I get in that truck with him, I'm just picturing in my mind we're going to hit a tree or
okay.
That's it.
Yes.
So I didn't get in the truck.
So you're going through in your mind end of life scenarios. You're like, this is it.
Yeah.
You have the consciousness and awareness of the gravity of the situation.
Mm-hmm. And so he pulls the tailgate of his truck down, and there I am sitting. I had white shoes on; they were blood red, and it was morning, and kids were going to school, and I didn't want to cause attention. And my neighbor opened her door, and she looked at me, and I'm trying to point to her, like, look at me, because I can't run. And in the meantime, he's pacing back and forth. So I don't know if he's going to get the gun again, and she looks at me, slams the door, and runs back in the apartment.
Oh, my.
I'm thinking, where's my help?
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by people, but I have no help. It's a helpless feeling. So, of course, the police came, the squad came. I just remember laying back there, and they're flashing pictures, and they're cutting off all my clothes. And as I laid in the ambulance, it seemed like forever. And I'm just like, God, just keep me awake. As long as I'm awake, I'm alive. Don't let me fall asleep. That was my biggest fear. If I fall asleep, then I'm going to die. And I was just thinking of my kids. And I remember hearing the ambulance guy get mad because the reason we were sitting there, they were waiting for a helicopter. And it was too cold that day, and they weren't going to be able to make it. So fast forward, I ended up at OSU Hospital for 5 days. I had exploratory surgery because one of the bullet wounds was close to my stomach. And thank God no internal organs had been hit. So I was there for 5 days. And as you can imagine, went through a lot. Actually, at first, I was in such shock. I'd have people come visit me, and I would just be like, I'm fine. I'm okay. You know, I'm alive, and he's in jail, so all is well. And they're looking at me like, okay. And it was a process. It was a process of, there was fear there the whole time. There was always nightmares and fear and triggers, depression, anxiety. And I remember, this seems silly but not silly. I used to work make baskets, and I'd be driving to work. I worked night shift, and I was terrified because it was nighttime, and just lights being behind me. I felt like ducking my head and thinking, is it somebody? Are they going to shoot me?
Wow.
Like, just.
How long did that go on?
It went on for quite a while.
Months, years?
Probably months.
Months.
And I went to counseling, and getting on the right medication was difficult because they did have me on medication for depression, but I got worse. I got to where I would get the kids off to school, but my whole day would just be spent crying, sleeping. Wow. But then it got to where I became numb and I didn't feel anything at all. And that was the scariest because I thought, wow, I can't even feel joy around my children. I can't, what am I going to do? And so getting on the right medication, going to counseling, and I remember going to the park and just thanking God for little things. Like, what is it that I can be thankful for? Because to be honest, I had spent many conversations with God and said, God, why am I alive? Why did you spare my life? Why am I here? Because I felt like I had no future, no hope. I felt damaged, worthless. I felt like, who's going to want to be with me? I've got 3 kids. I've got baggage even before this happened. And I was living recklessly because that's what I believed about myself. I was making bad choices. Wow. And actually, a couple weeks before this had happened, I accepted Jesus and got baptized. And even though I didn't have a full understanding, I know he was with me and I know he walked me through all this. But I came to a crossroad where I had to make a decision. Do I keep living recklessly and allow the enemy to win, allow him to take over my future? That's letting him win. Or do I trust in God and believe that he's good and just hold on to that little bit of faith and hope that I have to whatever that is? And that's what I did that day. I just repented, sobbed, cried out to God, and even prayed for this guy who I hadn't met yet, but just prayed that God would send me somebody who would love me for who I am and love my kids, somebody that was peaceful and kind, and that's exactly what God did.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I remember they were in my living room with Angie and I and some other couples. We were there in a small group, and she starts telling this story. And my face is like a lot of your faces, I'm sure, like jaw dropped to the floor. Like, I'm like, what in the world is going on? Because on the outside, I'm seeing John and Barbie. I'm seeing this couple. Nice people, kind people, very gracious people. And they start telling this, and I'm like, no way. And I was reminded of something that I think is good for all of us to be reminded of. That every single person has a past and a story that you probably don't know. But here's the truth. God is greater than our past.
Yes.
And He will help us through.
Yes.
So before I move on in the conversation, I want you to do me a favor, Barbie. A little bit putting you on the spot. I want you to talk to anyone here in the room and anyone online who is or has been trapped in an abusive relationship. What would you say to that individual or to those individuals?
The first thing I would say is you can't change other people. So all you can do is change yourself. And if you are in that situation, I realize that, you don't have the strength. You don't believe in yourself. But it's taking those steps, whatever it is, find somebody to confide in. Fill yourself with good things, the Bible for one.
Yeah.
But for me, I went to the library. I didn't have money to buy books at that time, but I just started filling myself with positive things about who I am and who God says I am. So that's the main thing, is just strengthening yourself. And if you are in a situation that's dangerous, one thing I know is if you have somebody in your family or a friend that you can have a secret word, so that, if you call them or if they hear you say that, they know that you're in danger. Because in those situations, you can't just,
Yes.
maybe they're on the phone, but you can't act like something's wrong.
Yes.
So it's like having safeguards in place, phone, money, whatever. But there is a shelter in this area. It's called New Beginnings. For women and kids, and you can go there. Actually, I go and talk there and share my story sometimes, so that's a great place.
Good. I think those are good steps. Thank you for sharing that part of your story with us. It takes a lot of courage.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's move forward in Scanlon's journey together, and then Big John shows up, right? And John, tell us a little bit about those beginning days of your relationship and your journey of faith, and how that all goes, and who's leading whom, and who's got their black belt in church and prayer and all that stuff. Talk to us about that.
Well, I will say, when we started dating, I didn't even have a white belt in church.
Okay. All right.
Growing up, it really. I had a very passive relationship with Christ when I was growing up. I knew who Christ was, but we didn't go to church every Sunday. I was never baptized as a child, and it just wasn't something that we did very often. Barbie and I got together, and obviously those first few years of us getting together weren't very far removed from when she had went through her trauma. And so there were a lot of things that we did early on, I did to try and not startle her, because she was very sensitive to, if she was sleeping. I learned very quickly not to startle her.
You might get a black eye.
I might get a black eye, yes. I never did.
Yeah.
But, and even, as a state trooper, I'd work really weird hours. So sometimes I'd get home 3:30 in the morning, and I would snap my fingers walking down the hallway just so she would know it was me, because I tried not to startle her. And even when we first started dating, just the act of me getting ready for work and taking the gun out of the safe and, loading it and putting it in my holster was very unnerving for her.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of things that we had to navigate through that a lot of couples don't have to navigate through. Mm-hmm. As far as spiritual leader in the house, it was Barbie first. And, when we finally made the decision to start going to church, it was Barbie telling me, hey, we're going to church. And, me being the faithful husband, yes, okay, dear. Whatever you say. And so very early on, Barbie was a spiritual leader in our house. And, and she started attending small groups. And at the time, for me, it was, okay, well, that's what women do, cool, go have fun. And then she started asking me to go to small groups. I'm like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a guy. We don't do that.
So I don't want to skip past that. So there was a real part of you that had predetermined that this is like Oprah book club moment,
Yes.
not guy thing,
Right.
rough, tough, exterior law enforcement officer, military background,
Yeah.
We don't go and share.
No, we go kill things and then we, smack each other around.
Yeah, gotcha.
I mean, that's what guys do.
Yeah. If someone might be interested, if a man might be interested in a group like that, maybe you could lead that group.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll go fishing. We'll go kill some deer. We'll do whatever.
All right. Okay. All right. So in group life, though, you and I have talked that group life was instrumental for both of you moving into what God had that was next for you. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll let Barbie start because really, it was Barbie, like I said at the beginning, she was the spiritual leader, and so she was the one to first really start to connect in groups.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. How in the world did you bring yourself to the point where you could trust a stranger or people that you didn't have deep connection with yet or deep relationship with after such a traumatic experience? Like, how did you bring yourself to that place?
It was a slow journey, honestly. Okay. Just little by little. Like, it'll be, in March, it's been 20 years. So
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. And, but in the beginning, I remember that I just felt like, God has blessed us with so much. And I felt the stirring inside of me that God didn't just do that for me, for us, and that I was supposed to start sharing my story. And it terrified me, to be honest. And I remember I was hesitant about going to any kind of group because I thought, okay, I don't fit in. I don't know enough about the Bible. I've got so much baggage. I feel damaged. I don't feel worthy. I would see these people at church, and they look like they had it all together. And I'm like, but I don't.
Wow.
And but I took that step, and little by little, I didn't really share much at first. I just kind of observed, kind of listened, and just to see people open up, to be vulnerable, to pray for one another and care for one another. It just brought me to that next step, like whatever it was, to just share a little bit, little by little. And that groups definitely helped me get to the next step, to where I started to share my story, where I went when I knew I had to go to the shelters to share. I was terrified. I decided to go to the police station to get the records of when I was shot, because there was lots of photos.
Why did you do that? You said that to me before. Why did you do that? That seems like the last thing in the world that I would want to do if I were you.
It's hard to explain, but I really felt the Holy Spirit telling me that this is the step I need to take to move forward. Wow. And I knew that I could trust God. God had brought me through all of this. God had blessed me. And I knew that wasn't my own thought, because my own thought would be, I'm not going to look at that. Yeah. So to be honest, when I got to the police station, I sat in the car and I just cried. And just prayed and cried. But I went in there, came back to the car, and to my surprise, as I looked at those pictures, I actually felt joy, because the girl that I seen in that picture was not me. It's not who I am today.
Wow. And
the girl in that picture was lost and broken. And I felt sad for that girl, but I'm like, wow, God, you have brought me through so much. Like, only you could bring me to where I am today. So to me, that was a healing moment that strengthened me to see, God is still with you. Look how far he's brought you, and there's more to do. So
that's so powerful. That's so powerful. Yeah. John, talk to us about the kinds of steps that you were able to take when you surround yourself with a community of people.
Yeah, for sure. And, so for us early on, it was not, we kind of just did our own thing. And we didn't let a whole lot of folks into our world. And when I started seeing Barbie take those steps, and I started to see God working in Barbie, she finally wore me down. And in 2012 is when I finally joined a group with Barbie. And it was amazing to me to see the relationships that I was able to build through that versus me just coming in on Sunday. And, because really Sunday is you come in, at the time for me, it was I come in, I check the box, I throw some money in the plate, I'm good. I've got 6 more days to do whatever.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't until that first small group that I saw, wait a minute, I can open up, I can be a little vulnerable, and then, based on that, I can start to grow. And it was after that first small group that I finally gave my life to Christ and was baptized.
Wow.
And, and so this is just 8 years ago, right? And so it was really, for me, it was very eye-opening. And that's when we started to make the transition from Barbie being the spiritual leader in our house to me finally filling that role, that I was called to do, to be the spiritual leader in our family.
It's amazing.
And that felt so good because I felt like before our conversations couldn't get very deep talking about God or whatever. And I just, in my heart, I just felt this, man, God has done so much for me. And so it was great when he was along for the journey. Now that we have deep, we pray together. We never used to do that before.
Yeah, that was a great first step, guys.
Yeah. So one of the things that I keep hearing them say that I want to make sure you hear as well, I've heard them say two things, that throughout this journey, they were afraid, they were scared. In the obvious moments of the domestic violence episode that Barbie experienced, all of us would be afraid faced with those kinds of moments. But then even throughout that, every step of the way, I kept on hearing them in their journey and in their conversation say they were afraid, they were scared. And I want to make sure you don't slip past that because I identify with that. A lot of times, I'm afraid. And I would say every single person in this room, every single person watching online, if you're really going to really be honest, at different moments in your faith journey, you're afraid. The thing that I admire, that I see as different, is John and Barbie's response to the fear. Their response to the fear was not stay stuck or stay reclusive or stay in themselves. They were courageous and did something that had faith attached to it. They did a step every time they were afraid. John went to the group not knowing what it was going to be like. He made the decision to be water baptized. Barbie invited people into her circle of relationships, which, can I just say this? If any of us would have a reason to not be around people, it's Barbie Scanlon. So I just want to say in front of God and everybody, I am so inspired by your courage. I am so in awe of what God is doing in your life. I really mean that. Like, you are giving me the courage to take some steps because you could have stayed where you were and just left to heck with everybody on the planet after that, right? Like, forget about this guy. Nobody else is going to get in my world, just me. That's amazing. That's amazing. So thank you for taking that step, really. And the other thing that I want to say is blended families are not easy. And I've watched you guys, and I hear your story. You guys are navigating that so well. Thank you for leading well in a difficult scenario. That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. A couple times, John, this happened first service too, but it's happening again. I can see it. Like, this big guy, you can see it if you were up close like me. Maybe you can see it. You're carrying right now in your eyes emotion.
Yes.
Can I?
Guys, it's okay.
It is okay. Yeah, it is okay. Can you invite us in a little bit and tell us what's going on, like right here, right now on the platform while you're sharing and thinking about all these things? Will you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, we've got a lot of things we've had to navigate through in the 17, almost 18 years we've been married. And, that was not... Early in the relationship, I would compartmentalize things. And it really stalled us from being the best that we could be because... growing up in the military and growing up as, a first responder, you see things that normal people don't see. You have to do things normal people don't have to do. And so to cope with that, you just lock it all away. And, just here, after giving my life to Christ, I realized that, okay, that doesn't work. for me to try and lock all this away, number one, it's getting in the way of Barbie and I being the best versions of ourselves. It's getting in the way of me being the best husband I can be, the best father I can be, and the best Christ follower that I can be. Because, if I allow everything to be compartmentalized and I don't share stories, I don't share, how God has changed me, then I'm no good to anybody. I'm not helping anybody else to find freedom. So, it's still, it's almost like, after you've been so hard for so long, you go the other way. Sometimes it's hard to kind of put the genie back in the bottle. And at the end of the day, really, I don't want to put the genie back in the bottle because I want to feel emotions, and I want to, every time Barbie tells her story, I still get choked up because, it's man, if I would have only been there a few years sooner. And,
wow.
But at the same time, I know that we both had to walk through everything that we had to walk through to be where we're at now. Because all of those experiences, as hard as they were and as tough as they were, they're all part of who we are.
That's right.
And so that's, I guess that's what makes us special and why we can connect with folks the way that we can connect with them.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You just reminded me when you shared that. So there was a time where I did share my story kind of on a platform, and I forget why you didn't see it. But anyways, people were coming up to me and asking about my story, and they would talk to John, and he hadn't even watched it. And I was like, so mad. I'm like, you're my husband. Why aren't you watching me share my story? This is like huge to me. Yeah. It's a big step. And, after we talked, it was just hurtful. It was hard for him to hear those things that I've been through, but he realized that he needed to be there for me. So that was another breakthrough.
Yeah, because you don't want to hear about the ones that you love having gone through trauma, but at the end of the day, you can't. It's part of who they are, and it was tough for me to go back and watch that because but it is part of you. It's part of your story, and and I knew everything that happened, but it was still difficult when you first started sharing it. It was still difficult for me to hear it and see it because I was still compartmentalizing things.
Yeah.
And so, for all you men out there, I know it's for a lot of us, we're raised that way. That's what we see on TV. That's what we read in books. That's what the world says we should be. We should be tough. We should not have feelings. We should just lock things away. I'm here to tell you it's wrong. You have to open yourself up to feel, especially, our veterans and our first responders, because I promise you, that's why we have the crisis we have right now with veterans and first responders taking their lives and just not having great relationships is because they lock it all away until it blows up.
One of the things that I never had language for until I started hearing your story, and it actually was in preparing for this weekend and for this conversation, that this is the language that I attach to what we're talking about, that I think should be encouragement for all of us. That one of the things I think is most fascinating and awe-inspiring about God is that he uses broken people to heal other broken people.
Yes.
Amen.
That's what he does. So if you're here and you're like, maybe you are where Barbie was in terms of her language, not mine. I'm damaged goods. I'm no good to anybody. No. That is a lie of the enemy. God will use your story in a redemptive way to heal people that you never imagined you would interact with.
Yes.
Amen.
That's what he does.
Yes.
What I want to do is I want to take a massive step forward in the clergy laity gap. What do I mean by that? The massive gap between the platform and the pew, the preacher and the believer. Like, we have to narrow that gap in the American church to come back to the foundation of what Christ meant for all of us, to be able to be equipped and used by him to make a difference in the world around us. That God will not be confined to just one individual on an isolated platform, that he wants to use every single person in this room, every single person watching online, every single person who will listen to this podcast, I want someone to know you have deep value and worth, and God is not done writing your story yet, and it's going to be an incredible ending. Just keep marching forward, keep turning the page, and God is going to do the miraculous through you.
Yes.
It's true.
Amen.
That's what he wants to do. So talk to the person, because we're out of time. So I'll finish with this one. There's a whole bunch more things to say, but let me just finish with this. Talk to the person or the persons who have settled into non-interaction with people. Not sold. Let me just be real clear for our church. For the people who aren't sold on groups. Nah, I'm not interested in that. Let's bring it down home to this point. What do you want to say to the individual who says, groups is not for me, that's for somebody else, I'm just waiting for this Won't You Be My Neighbor series to be over so we can get to some interesting things? Talk to that person.
For me, I would say first pray about it, and step out of your comfort zone. We get so stuck in our comfort zone, and even if something's good and we see that it could do good, it's I'm comfortable right here. One thing I do know is that each one of you have your own story. And, when you're ready to tell that, what a great, place to start is in a small group, because you don't know whose life you might change or who you might give hope to. Don't ever think that your story doesn't measure up. I've had people tell me that, and I'm like, no, there's people that you can reach with your story that I can't reach with mine, and so on. So, and you may be touched by someone else sharing, so I'd say just give it a try. And even if you don't, you just come there and you sit quietly, just give it a try and allow God to move in your heart.
So good.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, I know that I'm not the only man that has ever thought that groups are for women, for them to sit around and drink tea and talk about books. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. I mean, men need groups probably more than anybody else, because we try and have that tough exterior because that's what we think that we should do as men. And I would say if you're on the fence, give it a shot. Just go in with an open mind. Like Barbie said, you don't have to go in and share your whole story, but get in there and make yourself a little bit vulnerable. Even that first group, just be a little bit vulnerable, because once you start to get pride out of the way, then God can come in and work on you. But as long as we let pride get in the way, we're never going to get the breakthrough that God has planned for us. So it's you got to get out of your own way. And the first step is just joining a group. And if it's not a connect group, even just connecting with somebody that you trust.
I want to read a passage of scripture as we close. Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 says this: 2 are better than one, because they will get a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other one up. But pity the one who falls and has no one to help them. Also, if 2 lie together, they will keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. And a cord of 3 is not quickly broken. To me, in this verse, I see the writer describing the strength of relationships, and more importantly, the strength of God-centered relationships. Yes. That two cord situation is you and a person that you're in relationship with. Could be a spouse, could be a friend, could be someone else. But that third cord that comes into the equation is God. And God uses people. He uses people. And that's why it's so important that we don't forsake relationships. Because what happens between you and another person, listen to me very carefully. What happens between you and another person isn't merely human to human connection. It is the way that the Holy Spirit gets involved in the day-to-day operation of your life. It's where miracles happen. It's where life transformation comes. When you are in a room with another person and a group of people who have your best interest at mind, God does the miraculous in those moments. He absolutely does.
Yes.
And I just want to say one final time to John and Barbie, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. Thank you for leading well. Thank you for loving us enough to tell us what happened in your world and how God brought you out. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say one more thing and then I'm going to close because we're out of time. They've been helping and leading so well in the area of groups, and I'm really grateful to you both. And to all the group leaders who are here in the room and who were here earlier, and maybe who are watching online, thank you for helping in those ways by leading and leading well. And this is my prayer for all of us, that you would see today that the idea of doing relationships in groups is God's design for your life. This isn't an idea that a church came up with so that you would be involved in something. Can I just tell you, our lives, leadership lives, would be much easier if we didn't try to create opportunities for you to interact with other people. And my hope and my prayer is this, that you will see Connect groups as a genuine opportunity to be in relationship with other human beings. And that I hope that you accept the challenge of this opportunity and let us serve you in this way. Relationships matter. People matter. You need neighbors. So when you leave here in just a moment, you can go to Connect Central, get some questions answered about groups, find out what groups are happening, and get in a group. You can get in a group today and let God continue to write your story. In fact, I believe that through groups, God can change your story. That when you're in isolation and alone, the enemy wants to write a certain end, but God can change the end of the enemy's story for your life to one that is filled with awe and wonder and all of his goodness.
Thanks again for joining us today. Now take a second and subscribe to our channel, or share this message with someone you think could use it. If you would like to support this ministry financially, you can do that by visiting morelifechurch.com/give or through our app. Have a blessed day.